Good morning. The world's 100 meters race record was set way back in 2009 in Berlin. This was the World Athletics Championships, and this was set by, yes, of course, Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt has the world record for the 100 meters even now. What is interesting is that Usain Bolt has gone on record saying that when he was a young chap, when he was a young boy, his favorite cricket team was Pakistan. Now, I know this will be disturbing for our Indian fans, but the fact is that Usain Bolt was mesmerized by the Pakistani cricket team. And he has also said that in the event of a Pakistan-West Indies match, he might have rooted for Pakistan. He himself was a fast bowler to begin with, and therefore his hero was Waqar Younis. Waqar Younis, as you all know, has been one of the world's greatest fast bowlers. There is a very interesting fact about Waqar Younis. You will be wondering as to why I am talking about Younis today. But this anecdote is very important. This has been told by Younis himself. What happened was Waqar was, to begin with, an athlete. He was jumping, he was doing pole vault, he was throwing the javelin. Somewhere, at some point of time, he turned towards cricket. He began as being a spinner, but then graduated to being a pace bowler. And then he did play some few first-class matches. And this was probably the fifth or the sixth first-class match he was playing in Pakistan. And of all the people who watched him on television was the great Imran Khan. Imran Khan at that point was the cricket captain of Pakistan. Mr. Khan was unwell that day, therefore he was watching this match on television, and he noticed this young bowler who impressed him immensely. So the next day he went to the ground and then walked up to this young bowler who was practicing his bowling on the nets, and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Young man, pack up. You will go to Sharjah tomorrow." I think there was a Champions Trophy triangular meet in Sharjah between India, Pakistan and the West Indies that year. So the interesting point is that Imran Khan watched Waqar Younis playing a first-class match on television, not even directly, and was able to assess the talent which this young man had. And of course, Waqar Younis went on to play for Pakistan and terrorize the rest of the world. He is certainly one of the best bowlers ever to have done pace bowling. I am talking about Waqar Younis because we've had this massive fiasco a few days back where we were demolished, decimated in a very embarrassing way by the English in the semifinals between India and Pakistan in the T20 World Championships at Adelaide, Australia. The defeat is numbing. It is a stunning defeat. This was as I said, very embarrassing. It was a disgraceful performance by the Indian team. I'm using very strong words. Some people may be disturbed, but the fact remains that in India, no one can dare criticize the Indian cricket team or the BCCI for reasons best known to us. If you criticize the BCCI, then you're out. You cannot do any commentary, you cannot be on television, you cannot be an expert, and nor can you write any columns. You are just erased off the map, and that's how the system works. There, of course, is no free speech where Indian cricket is concerned in India. So therefore, any expert, whether he is an Indian or whether he comes from Australia or West Indies or England, they are very, very careful in not hurting the sentiments of the Indian Cricket Board, because what will result is they will lose their money, they will lose their lucre, their careers will come to a grinding halt. And here again, I am astonished. Actually, I'm not astonished. I was expecting this. After this defeat, you will notice that I don't think there has been a single Indian cricketer of repute We've had some magnificent batters. We have legendary openers of the game. We've had, people consider as the all-time greats of the game. Yet no one has come down fiercely about the selection of the Indian cricket team. And the reason is simple, because they enjoy these perks. They enjoy the perks where they're allowed to come on television and to give commentaries, give their expert comments. But these expert comments are usually not expert. They're just basically diplomatic messages, politically correct statements. Of course, when we got beaten in the Asian Cup very recently, before the World Cup, we got resoundingly beaten by the Pakistanis and by even Sri Lanka. Yet, there was no criticism of the cricket team. In fact, when the team was announced for the Australian World Cup, our legendary opener and commentator, who was commentating just about everywhere and all the time, stated, and this is on record, that this was the best team available, and therefore we should all back this team. We all knew that this team was, over the hill. Most of the players were more than 35 years old. And now we've seen their very insipid, in fact, a very scared performance, right? And of course, we have the best power play score in the world. That is the runs scored in the first 6 overs of a T20 match. We are actually rock bottom. Pakistan, Afghanistan, the West Indies, Australia, England, New Zealand, every other country has a higher rate than what we had in this tournament, which means that we had a brilliant opening pair. We, of course, had the undernourished, malnourished opener who captained the team, and we had the other person was that scintillating opener who is considered the batsman of the generation by a lot of cricketing experts, and I fear his average for this tournament would be in single figures and not anything more than that. And that is the primary reason we were decimated in the semi-finals. And apart from that, we did not bother to pick up the fastest bowler in the world today, who happens to be from Jammu. His name is Malik, and Malik actually, in the last edition of the IPL, bowled consistently above 155 kilometers per hour, which is really fast. And I believe he bowled once at 157, definitely 156, which is a tearaway pace. And this boy should have been in the cricket team. When a Waqar Younis can be picked up, being watched on television, in a first-class match, and who has just about 5 to 6 matches, first-class matches under his belt before he is selected for the Pakistani cricket team. We have a bowler who consistently bowled above 155 kilometers per hour in the last edition of the IPL, and yet he was observed. He was observed by all the cricketing pundits, the coaches, the managers, and the so-called experts, and yet he was not included in this team, which went to Australia, which is notorious for its fast pitches. So that was a glaring mistake. Yet no one will talk about this. No one will dare mention this in this country. No one, whether he's an Indian or whether he is an English expert or an Australian expert, will not mention this, because then he will miss out on a lucrative career in the next IPL edition. He will lose out on his bucks. Now, I'm mentioning cricket because most of you watch cricket, and therefore you are more familiar and more aligned towards cricket, so you will understand what I'm trying to imply. I can go into more details, but I will desist. And of course, I must mention that we have a galaxy of very talented batters, such as Prithvi Shaw. We have Gill. We have Sanju Samson, who could have easily played in the opening slot for the Indian team. And apart from this boy, Malik, who is from Jammu, who bowls very, very fast and is in fact the fastest bowler in the world today. And he would have been a stunner in this tournament, regardless of what our experts say. I'm talking about this because we have a very similar situation on a global level. We have the serious problem We have a very serious problem which is being observed right across the globe, wherever they have good data, wherever they have good statistics on deaths. We are finding that this year there have been more deaths as compared to deaths in previous years. Now, how do we do this? What we do is that we take out the average of 5 years, let's say from 2015 to 2019. We take the deaths, the average deaths then, and then compare the deaths this year. And we find that there is a significantly greater number of deaths occurring this year. For example, now this data is not mine. This data is not from a pamphlet. This data is not from some sort of a rag newspaper. This is official British data. This is official English data. This is from the Office of the National Statistics, which is a UK government agency, which has recorded and which has been reporting deaths, and which has found that deaths in the last week of October, that is very recently, in the last week of October, there were about 1,486 deaths, excess deaths, as compared to the average in the last 5 years in that last month of October. So I will repeat this. The Office of the National Statistics has informed us. The data is present for all of you to browse, for all of you to see, that in the last week of October, there were 1,486.85 excess deaths as compared to the average of the last 5 years from 2015 to 2019. Now, this is a considerable number of deaths, excess deaths, in a small country like England, where the population is just about 80 million. So, another important thing is that of these excess deaths in that week, only about 5.8% were because of COVID, which means that more than 9.5% of deaths were non-COVID. They were not because of COVID. The number of deaths because of COVID, attributed to COVID, were about 650, whereas the total number of excess deaths were about 1,485 or 1,486. Now, again, alarmingly, the Office of the National Statistics gives us data from last April, that is April 2022 to the end of October 2022, and tells us that every week there were excess deaths as compared to the average of the last 5 years. And this excess deaths number is about 1,200. So just about every week there have been excess deaths in those 6 months, from April to October. The deaths were less only in the fortnight when Her Majesty the Queen died. That was the time. Probably then the paperwork was not being done. Otherwise, every week, since April to the end of October, and possibly even now, because we don't have the data for the current month, there have been excess deaths every week to the tune of 1,200 odd. Now, the important thing is here as to why are we having excess deaths in England. Now, also, excess deaths have been noticed in a lot of countries in Europe, in a lot of states in the USA, and also in Western Australia. So the point is, and this again is not being highlighted by the mainstream media. And of course, in India, we have no media apart from the mainstream media. All these media outlets which pretend to be alternative media are probably as good or as bad, in fact, better than mainstream media in providing disinformation. So we come back to the main point which I'm making, is that no one dares to talk about these excess deaths in the mainstream media across the globe, and especially in India. Why are people dying more now this year than in the previous 5 years? The data is clear, it is crystal clear, it is presented officially, it is available for anyone. Anyone can check out on this data. Now, the reason being provided by the British Heart Foundation is that possibly during the lockdown period, people were coddled in their homes, they were in house arrest, and therefore their metabolic diseases the diseases progressed, in the sense that the blood sugar crept up because people were not exercising. Atherosclerosis, that is the blocks in the artery, may have increased, and cancers were not detected because they were not going to the hospitals. So this could be the reason, because has been a backlog. There was disease which now is suddenly emerging, and which is presenting itself, and therefore one reason is that because of lockdowns we have an increase in deaths. These are, of course, non-COVID deaths, which means people are dying because of heart failure and diabetes and possibly cancer. But the problem is that this means, once again, and this is what I had told more than 2.5 years ago, that lockdowns are a bad deal. So what they're saying is that we did the lockdowns, and because of the lockdowns now we are having excess deaths. But I don't buy this. I don't buy this argument. I don't think that because of the lockdowns and because of lack of activity, we are having more deaths. Yes, this could be a reason, this could be a strong reason, but this is not the main cause, I believe, that is causing this surge on excessive weekly deaths. Because we also have data on people dying with their vaccination status. And this again is provided by the Office of the National Statistics, the British Government Statistical Bureau. And this gives us data from January 2022 to May 2022. And this clearly tells us, this data is adjusted. This is adjusted to age. It is linked to the vaccination status and also the months. And we find that from January to May, the deaths, the excess deaths, I'm talking about excess deaths, these deaths were always occurring more in the vaccinated people than in the unvaccinated people. So now we have a problem. Now the data, the evidence which is presented to us, which is available, as I've said again and again, to any one of you, is that more people who got vaccinated are dying, have died, than people who were unvaccinated. And this is across every age group. This is whether you are below 18 years, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even if you're more than 90. What is being seen is people who are vaccinated, when compared to unvaccinated, are dying more. So the conclusion, if not the conclusion, an inference can be made, a very strong inference can be made, that maybe something in the vaccines is causing this excess deaths. We know that the vaccines, the messenger RNA vaccines, because this data is from England, where a large number of people were given the messenger RNA vaccines. The messenger RNA vaccine is basically a RNA transcript which is put in a lipid nanoparticle, which is injected, which is supposed to stay in your shoulder, but actually goes all over the body, and it stays there for months, at least for 4 to 6 months. And what this is doing is that this is making your ribosomes in your cells to produce these spike proteins. And these spike proteins have been found in just about every organ in the body, especially in the blood vessels, and that is why they are present in the heart and in the brain, and of course in the ovaries, in the testes, in the bone marrow, in the lymph nodes. And by being there, they can trigger off an inflammatory response, and which can lead to damage of these organs. So what we are finding is that the people who were vaccinated are dying more, especially in countries which had more vaccination with the messenger RNA vaccines, and as opposed to people who were unvaccinated. But as I've said, very few people will dare, especially nobody from the mainstream media will bother to tell you the obvious. Now, the other problem is that this is still a hypothesis, though there are reports in autopsies which are showing that most people who have died have had problems in the heart. The spikes which are produced persist by the vaccines. The spikes which are produced persist in the body for months. They get lodged, let's say, in the heart, and that's where you have the inflammation of the heart, and that's how you have myocarditis. So the problem is that we have to observe, analyze this data very carefully, and before we embark on boosters, before we embark on annual boosters or 6-monthly boosters, it is imperative that we get down to understanding why exactly are we seeing these excess deaths.